Can Boston College bounce back in year 3 under Bill O'Brien? What does Tavita Pritchard have in store for us in year 1 at Stanford? And can the Notre Dame Fighting Irish make it back to the college football playoff this fall? Preview week continues here on Locked On ACC.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On ACC podcast. I'm Julian Council. Former NC State football letterman Kenton Gibbs will be with me momentarily, but today's episode of Locked On ACC is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Preview week comes to a close on today's show as we have 2 more ACC football programs, but 3 more schools to preview heading into this year. We have Notre Dame, Boston College, and Stanford to close out today's preview week. As, yes, I understand that Notre Dame is not in the ACC as far as football goes, as they remain independent, but there are going to be several ACC schools that play them this season. So he thought, why not throw the Irish a bone and have Tyler Wojciak from Locked On Irish on today's show. AJ Black of Locked On Boston College and Eagle Insider, a part of the 247 Sports Network, going to come on to preview BC. And then Alex Hou of Stanford Football Updates and the Cardinal Canopy podcast will come on to preview the Stanford Cardinal to wrap up today's show. But let's go ahead and start off with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who were so close to a college football playoff appearance. And they'll tell you, winning a national championship last year. We'll talk to Tyler Wojciak to figure out how Marcus Freeman and the boys are feeling about themselves heading into 2026 here on Locked On ACC. Even though they're not technically a member of the ACC in football, they are a member of the ACC, and several programs are going to have to see them this season. So let's go ahead and preview the Notre Dame Fighting Irish with Tyler Wojciak of Locked On Irish. Tyler, obviously last season did not end the way that anyone in South Bend, or really outside of South Bend, after Notre Dame decided not to play in the bowl game, wanted the season to end. After not making the playoff, bringing back a bunch of talent, Marcus Freeman heading into this year, what are the vibes in South Bend heading into 2026?
The vibes at this point are, let's get this season started, because it has been quite literally the longest offseason in the history of this program. And we knew that's how it was going to be from the very beginning. The fact that they didn't play in a bowl game, so the offseason really started the first week of December, was pretty jarring, especially for a team that had national title aspirations at the end of last season. So I feel like the entire motto this offseason, both from inside the program and outside the program, has been leave no doubt. It's been the rallying cry for months, but now that we're just under 2 weeks away, I think everybody is ready to put the ball down and play, because even though there's a ton of hype, there's a ton of expectations, I think the guys have been hitting each other for a bit too long, so everyone is just very anxious to get the ball rolling here.
Everybody knows about CJ Carr. Everybody knows about Jaden Greathouse and company out wide. Tell us about some lesser-known names that you expect to emerge and make a meaningful difference on this Notre Dame team. And again, don't say Leonard Moore either, because we know. Tell us about somebody that the population doesn't know about.
I'll bring up Aneyas Williams, and this is not a lesser-known name to the Notre Dame fan base. He's going into his 3rd year with the program, but everyone in the outside world has been asking, how is Notre Dame going to replace Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price? And that is a totally fair question. You don't normally have 2 first-round running backs, let alone in the same draft class. Then you have to replace both of those guys in the same season. But Aneyas Williams is a guy who has, I don't even want to say patiently waited his turn, because he actually got some action as a freshman, even during the midst of that playoff run Notre Dame had. And then last year, they decided to just basically go with Love and Price all year long. So Aneyas Williams didn't really play. He played less than he did as a freshman, but I think this year it's his time. It's his opportunity as the starting running back at Notre Dame. And by all accounts, he is chomping at the bit to get out there and take advantage of this. And I think in his mind, he's only going to be the starting running back at Notre Dame for this one season, because I believe that the way that he thinks this season is go, he's going to have a chance to get drafted after this year. And, he's a great leader for the running back room. He's a big leader for this offense. So Notre Dame fans have been waiting to see him for a little while, and I think the outside world, the college football world at large, is going to learn the name Aneyas Williams here in the near future.
Talk to me about year two of CJ Carr being the starting quarterback. I think a lot of people across the nation really only saw the Miami game, maybe a little bit of USC. And then by time late season's happening, I mean, Notre Dame, they crushed a lot of teams. So I don't think too many people are, especially SEC country, even people in the ACC, maybe not as tuned in. How much better do you think he can be this season after really it was a year where didn't start out the best, which naturally hadn't had that ton of experience, but then ended up being one of the better quarterbacks in the second half of last year?
Despite the results, I actually thought CJ Carr played pretty well in those first two games. He exceeded my expectations against Miami. I didn't expect them to throw the ball as much as they did, and maybe they threw the ball a little bit too much, depending on who you ask, in that Miami game. But they gave him the keys as a redshirt freshman to go on the road and start against a top 10 team. And even though the team lost, he did pretty well, all things considered. And then Texas A&M was a shootout. They put up 40 points on offense. So they're not the reason that they lost that game. But, then he got into a groove. I think he hit somewhat of a freshman wall about halfway through the season where he wasn't quite as consistent. He was missing some throws that really showed up against USC, where he had by far his worst game of the season. But then he got things back on track. But going into year two, the thing you hear over and over again with CJ Carr is how it's like having a coordinator on the field. And even though he's only played one season as a starter and he's going into his third year at Notre Dame, Mike Denbrock, the offensive coordinator, said he basically has the entire playbook at his disposal at the line of scrimmage, which is a huge responsibility for any quarterback, let alone a college quarterback. But they trust him so much. He has such a high football IQ, and he spends so much time in the film room. And obviously, with Lloyd Carr being his grandpa, he was born in a football family. He has been raised to be the starting quarterback. So when you have a guy who is able to read and understand defense as well as he can, I think that's sort of like the secret weapon, because there's so many college quarterbacks who have a lot of arm talent and they can make all the throws. But for someone who can truly understand what the defense is showing them and then getting the offense in the right play every single time, I think that's going to lead to a lot of success for CJ Carr, a little bit more than he had last season.
We know about the defensive backfield. We know one of the most experienced linebacker cores in all of America, a defensive tackle rotation that is allegedly 8 deep, allegedly, of course. But you all are known for producing offensive linemen and tight ends, two lesser known positions that, don't get as much glory and shine as some of the others. Tell us about some of those guys. Tell us who you're excited to see play this year and who's the next in line for that great tight end legacy that Notre Dame's created as of late.
Well, Kenton, first I want to address the defensive tackle. It's probably going to be more like a 6-man rotation, and then that could get cut down to 4. But they are remarkably deep at that position considering where they were at the start of the offseason. They went and got some guys in the transfer portal. They really shored that up. On offense, so Cooper Flanagan is going to be the starting tight end. He actually missed pretty much all of last season as he was recovering from an Achilles tear that he actually suffered during the college football playoff way back when Notre Dame played Georgia a couple years ago. He tore his Achilles in like the second play of the game. He was only tight end 2 at the time. He would have been tight end 2 last year, but he's a really good blocker, and I think Notre Dame missed him in the run game at points last season, especially in short yardage situations. But he's fully healthy. He's back. He's ready to go. So he's going to be tight end 1. But then I'll give you another name. Maybe this is more for the long-term future, although I do think this player is going to have more of an impact in the second half of the season. His name's Ian Premer, 5-star freshman out of Kansas. Notre Dame really badly wanted him coming out of high school, and they were like, hey, you're going to produce this year. I don't think we'll see a ton of them at the start. There's probably going to be an adjustment period when it comes to the physicality of playing tight end at a major college football program, but he's 6'6". He runs extremely well for a tight end, and he just looks different than every guy in that room. So it might not happen right away, but I think people are going to recognize Ian Premer by the end of this season.
I want to get to the over-under here to wrap up, but I feel like we've got to spend more time defensively. I mean, Ken's already brought up Leonard Moore, Christian Gray. There's just an insane level of talent that there is veteran-wise, recruiting classes that Marcus is bringing in. I know last year you bring up the shootout against A&M. Chris Ash was certainly under fire, and then you looked at moving forward, like just nobody could score on them. How much better do you think the defense can be this year in year 2 under Chris Ash with that kind of continuity and the level of talent that they have now?
I think it'll be significantly better, especially against the better teams that they play. The Notre Dame coaching staff probably wasn't ready to admit it at the time, but bringing in a defensive coordinator while also maintaining the same defensive staff, like defensive line coach, linebackers coach, defensive backs coach. It was an interesting transition for all the parties involved there. But now Chris Ash, he's coming into his second year. He knows his personnel a lot better, and I would say that that was probably the biggest mistake they made in the first 2 games. It wasn't really anything schematically. They had a couple injuries, but more really it came down to they weren't playing the right guys to start the season. There were some young guys who really came on after that game, and you think, wait a second, they probably should have been starting from the very beginning. So, look, that's on the coaches, and you have to have a better understanding of your personnel when the season starts. So I think that all plays into it. But they're just so deep at every position, and I feel like, any single college coach across the country is going to tell you the one thing they want more than anything is depth along the defensive line. Notre Dame has that. They have star power in the secondary with Leonard Moore, Briante Johnson, and Don Schuler. And at linebacker, they could legitimately go 4 deep with guys who could start at the Power 4 level. So if they're not a lot better than last season, I would be pretty surprised. And they were actually really good to end the year. Obviously took some lumps at the beginning, but I think it's going to be a big year for the Notre Dame defense. And with that schedule, they probably shouldn't give up many points at all season.
Yeah, and let's talk about that schedule. Looking at FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook partner here, the Locked On Podcast Network. The over-under is 11.5 wins, which is a big number. But you look at the schedule, sure, maybe Sunday night against Wisconsin at Lambeau Field, a bunch of money that they've spent there to try to prop up Luke Fickell instead of fire him. Maybe they could spur an upset. We've certainly saw Notre Dame lose that game. I mean, many times last year they lost Miami. We've seen them lose to Texas. So I'm sorry, I don't want to bring up bad memories. Sorry, Tyler. But maybe that happens, but I don't really see it. Like at BYU, October 17th feels like the first time they could legitimately be in trouble to lose a game. Then of course there's Miami at home on November 7th. And then maybe SMU. I don't really buy it. Where are you at as far as over-under? Because that's a big one. It's basically, do you think they lose another game outside of Miami?
Well, the odds are pretty heavily favored on the under because if they lose one game, then the under hits, which is pretty crazy. Yeah. I feel like the schedule is so imbalanced. The top teams, I think Miami could win the national championship this season. Yeah. So playing a team like that is a big deal, especially in November. That's actually going to be the first weekend after the first CFP rankings come out. I've said all offseason long, there's a chance that's number 1 versus number 2, depending on what happens with Ohio State, Texas, because Miami has a pretty easy schedule as well. If both teams are undefeated, which is certainly a possibility. That could be one of the biggest games of the entire season. So they have that. SMU, I don't really know just how good they're going to be. Actually, I spoke with Grayson, the host of Locked On SMU. We talked about this for a while. He thinks they could be a 1-loss team going into that game, so that's going to be tricky. BYU, that might be one of the bigger home games they've had in a really long time. They're absolutely going to come out ready to play for that one. So there's 3 losable games, but outside of that, I'm with you. Wisconsin is the team that is probably just the biggest unknown, given all the guys that they brought in. Colton Joseph, the quarterback, who is a really good runner, kind of gave Indiana a scare in the season opener last season. So we'll see if he's able to do that against Notre Dame this year. But then after that, the schedule just really takes a turn, and then you're looking at teams like North Carolina, Boston College, and Syracuse, who were just abysmal last season. So to me, it's basically like a 4-game season, but then, of course, I say that, and that means they're going to drop the home opener to Rice like they did against Northern Illinois and Marshall. So I just jinxed it.
I don't think
you're going under or over. You're going under or over, Tyler. You said a lot, but you got to give us one. Are they running the table, or the table running them?
I'll say they are going to run the table, and I feel like that's going to come back to bite me. But I look at each if I look at each game individually, and obviously it's a really long season, injuries happen, who knows? But I do think that this team has the ability to go 12-0. That Miami game is going to be a toss-up. I can't believe the spread right now is 6.5 on FanDuel. I think by the time that those teams play, that's going to be Notre Dame minus 3.5 max, more than likely. Yeah, injuries could change that, but that's going to be an awesome game. I think they're going to be able to get by BYU as well, although that's going to be just a really tough matchup. They're going to try to turn that into a slow ground and pound game. But I very rarely pick Notre Dame to go undefeated, even if I think that they're better than every team on the schedule. I felt that way back in 2024, but this year feels like a special year, and they've got a bad taste in their mouth after last season. I think they're going to try to rectify that, and to do so, that means going potentially 15-0 and winning a national championship.
I have to ask you one last one before we get out of here. So say they do end up, maybe lose Miami. can they afford to lose another game? Can they go 10-2 and get in? Do you think they'll be in that top 12? Yeah, so you say no. You think they're done if that happens? Say like the 2 losses, because I would think for that to happen, I don't know. You have to lose probably like to Wisconsin and then maybe at BYU and have the Miami win, have the SMU win, or maybe have the BYU win. Like, because you can't lose both BYU and Miami, I would think.
The only way I could really see that happening is if the game that they lose is Wisconsin, and Wisconsin ends up being a lot better than everyone thinks. And they might not even be that much better in terms of like an overall talent perspective, although I do think they will. But if you look at Wisconsin's schedule, like Luke Fickell made a lot of mistakes in his first couple of years, but we also have to look at the fact that Wisconsin had the toughest schedule in the Big Ten for the past 2 seasons, and now they're getting some good karma, and they have a really favorable Big Ten schedule this season. So if Notre Dame somehow drops that game and then they end up turning things around, they go on, they beat Miami, and then Wisconsin ends up having a much better year than people anticipate, and then say Notre Dame maybe loses to like BYU. That's the only possible scenario, but no, I don't think they could afford 2 losses. If they're not getting in last year with 2 losses, I have no reason to believe that they're going to get in there this season with 2 losses again. So the best way to avoid that from happening is to just not lose and win at least 11 games.
Yeah, well, you think they're going to run the table, and I can see that happening as well. He is Tyler Wojciak of Locked On Irish. Check him out over on YouTube, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, and over on the socials at Tyler Wojciak as well. Up next, Boston College Eagles. AJ Black of Locked On Boston College going to join us to break down Bill O'Brien heading to year 3 as we continue preview week here on Locked On ACC. There are more live events than ever we're seeing right now. Games, concerts, comedy shows, festivals. The hard part usually isn't deciding what you want to attend. It's actually getting the tickets. Between long wait times, confusing checkout processes, and surprise fees, buying tickets can sometimes feel harder than it should. That's why so many fans are turning to Game Time. The app is built to make buying tickets simple with upfront pricing, seat views before you buy, and exclusive savings opportunities that help get you the events you want without the usual hassle. There's just something different about being there live, whether it's the crowd reaction, the energy in the building, or a moment that everyone experiences together. It's one of those things that doesn't fully translate through a screen. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Well, in year 1 under Bill O'Brien, it felt like a match made in heaven between him and Boston College. But in year 2, it very much was not that. AJ Black, the host of Locked On Boston College, also covers BC for Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Sports Network, joins us now here on Locked On ACC. The vibes are good after year 1. After year 2, feels like the vibes aren't that great, AJ. How are you feeling heading into the season about the Eagles?
Literally everything is up in the air. I have never gone into a season with so many question marks where I'm not sure if it's going to work or it's not going to work, because BC lost 30 players in the transfer portal last year. They lost 70% of their staff. They have new coordinators at offense and defense where Bill O'Brien is taking over the offense. You brought in Ted Roof, who I know a lot of folks have strong opinions on Ted Roof. And then you bring in new quarterback, new running back, 3/5 of your offensive line, your entire wide receiver room minus Jaden Skeet. You just lost your starting tight end for the season, who was probably the best player that you had. Your defense looks stronger, but there are a lot of new faces in there as well. So I've watched a lot of practices. I've been there. I still don't know what this team is. And I don't know what their ceiling and their floor is because there's just so many question marks. You brought in a quarterback, Mason McKenzie from Saginaw Valley. I'm going to tell you, if I had to hear a comparison to Trinidad Chambliss one more time, I will scream, because it's apples and beach balls. Okay. This is what this is with these two. Mason's fun to watch, but Trinidad Chambliss is a unicorn. Like, how many D2 quarterbacks end up becoming like that? So there's a huge question right there. You have no quarterback that has ever thrown a P4 pass yet. It's a little worrisome. I'm not sure what we have here.
Okay. Well, you know what? Let's talk about one thing that you do have, because Boston College fans accuse me of being too negative about them, never saying anything positive. How the hell did y'all keep JP Price? I mean, he's one of the best safeties, not just in the ACC, but I think in the country. And you kept him for another year. How did y'all end up pulling that one off?
Talked to KP earlier this summer, and he said it wasn't really even a question. He says he loves Boston College. This is where he wants to end it in college, and there was not really even a question of going to the portal. Now, there probably was. I'm sure there were teams that really wanted him, but he is emphatic. This is his room. It's his defense. You watch him out there. He's running everything. And as you said, Kenton, like, KP is really, really good, and he's going to get better this year. Yeah. Last year he was playing linebacker at one point because BC ran out of linebackers. And with Ted Roof, say what you will about his defenses, but he moves guys around. So you're going to see KP up at the line. You're going to see him in coverage. You're going to see him all over the place. It's a good problem to have when you have a guy like this. And he, in terms of his looks this year, I don't know how much weightlifting he did, but he looks ready for the NFL. He just looks like $1 million. And I think he's going to be a real asset for BC's defense. I think he's incredible. And, after losing Turbo Richard, Eric Doherty, Omar Thornton, Reed Harris, like all your stars or guys that were ascending, to keep KP Price was A, incredibly surprising, but B, probably the biggest news BC got in the offseason.
So it sounds like I need to do some tampering with Boston College players next year, because if KP ain't getting no calls, I should have put in hey, we got a safety void here. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Julie. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I mean, he's already trying to tamper with CJ Sadler in Chapel Hill, so it's not the first player that he'll tamper with in the ACC this offseason. AJ, I will freely admit that in trying to find something positive to say about BC, I did make the Mason McKenzie, Trinidad Chambliss comparison.
No.
Now, I'm not believing like that's going to happen, but I'm just saying it's happened before, so maybe it can happen again for BC
maybe.
and their benefit. But let's stay there with McKenzie. I'm a little puzzled by this. Bill O'Brien's the same coach who told Jalen Milroe, you're not a quarterback. He also had Tommy Castellanos, then benched him in favor of Grayson James. Then last year finally got his kind of guy in Dylan Lonergan. And by the reporting that I've seen, the team was never behind that kid. They wanted Grayson James, and now he's going with Mason McKenzie, who's probably more of a runner than a thrower at this level. So, like, what is the mindset from BOB here with this quarterback decision?
You brought it up. Like, it's so interesting that just 2 years ago, you had a guy, Tommy Castellanos, say what you will about how he could throw, but he could make plays. He won games for BC in 2023 with Jeff Hafley. Like, when things weren't working, you could get him to run the ball. And O'Brien basically broke him. Like, he just made him into a pocket passer, and all the instincts and things that Tommy did well were just gone. You brought in Dylan Lonergan, a guy he recruited at Alabama, and you were like, okay, so he must know what he's getting here. And those first few games, the game against Michigan State, Lonergan looked great. He was electric and, I think they put up 40-something points in that game, and he was the main reason for it. But once defenses started getting film on him, he became a pumpkin. Like, he could not read blitzes at all. Everything was short and underneath stuff, and they started reading that, and then he just fell apart. Then they brought Grayson James back. It seemed to me his mojo and everything that he had that actually worked in 2025 was gone. So you bring in Mason McKenzie, and this is where it confuses me too, right? Like, he ran for almost 1,000 yards last year for Saginaw Valley. We just went through this 2 years ago with Tommy. Like, is this going to be the same thing? And it's different. It is very different from what it's interesting. An older coach, like, can he learn his lesson from something like that? You'd always think they're going to kind of dig in. Mason is going to be much more mobile, and they're going to not force him to be a pocket passer. From what I've watched in the summer and the spring, it's very different than what they were doing with Tommy. That's good. He's also got a piece of what made Tommy good too, which was those intangibles. Like, he's got that swag to him a little bit, which you see a guy that's like 5'10", and you're like, but he's got it. Like, you heard him in ACC Media Day. Like, he hears the people that say that he's not going to be the guy that's going to be able to bring BC up. And he's like, I'm going to prove these people wrong. And you see it on the field. The players all love him. So he's got that piece. Lonergan never had that. And I think that's going to be an important factor, because I think he's got some tools. I'm a little worried about the passing part. He's got a pretty good arm. But the receivers, I don't know what they really have. I'm still a little worried that they don't have the right wide receivers to actually be able to have an effective passing game. But I think Mason, he could, again, of the biggest question marks, he's a number one. His ceiling could be high. Who knows? Maybe he will be electric, but his floor could be really low too. It's just where it goes for him.
All right, AJ, we like to try to keep it on the field. And with BC, it's not a ton to talk about on the field. Let's just be honest. But you all have a new president. We saw you talking about it on your podcast. We saw you talking about it on TikTok. You are saying we are ready, potentially, with this change in leadership to be more serious about sports. So when you look at Butler, are you looking at somebody that you think will take a less apathetic stance, a more active role in making BC football, BC basketball the front door of Boston College?
Yes, I believe fully in Jack Butler, that he has a much different vision for BC sports than Father Leahy did. I mean, just look at the basketball hire. I was saying this to Julian off the air earlier. Like, I was just watching a national show where they were like, how did BC end up with Luke Murray? Like, this is a guy that's thought of as a offensive genius, the architect of UConn's run, and a really up and coming coach. Well, BC's starting to put money out. We're seeing it with the rev share. They were able to go out and get some guys. Recruiting, yeah, their numbers aren't great, but they flipped a kid from Louisville, which they've never done before. They kept a kid from going to Michigan on his OV. Like, they're putting some things together that way. That's showing me that the school's starting to do things the right way a little bit. So, sure, they've got miles to go, right? But it's starting to put them back into the competition where they should be. But it's always Boston College. This has been their problem for 20 years, is they're playing catch up all the time. They're playing catch up. They're never in front of anything. And so when you're watching like the football team, last year, part of the issue was they didn't have a full rev share, which is ridiculous. Why? Where did that money go? They didn't have that. So then, their portal class last year was terrible. And then you saw it on the field when they had no depth, when they got hammered with injuries. This year, they go out, they get a lot of guys with a lot of potential. We don't know what they're going to do yet. But, you look at a guy like Evan Dickens, their running back. This kid ran for 1,400 yards. I know it was for Liberty last year, but, he was recruited by Georgia Tech. He is, going to be a name to watch for. And watching him in practice, he's really good. And so they've got a couple guys that they brought in, I think, that will start to show the world that there's some talent at Boston College. It's not a desolate wasteland. And I think the funding and the vision of a new president should help BC kind of step back up to where they need to be.
Well, we know there's talent at BC. A lot of those guys have left to go to places like Indiana and Miami, as you mentioned early on the show. So we know they have talent, but looking at this team this year, you don't necessarily know, and we all don't know what they're exactly going to be. And that's with any team. We all kind of project based off what you do know, what you don't know. But looking at the over-under, according to FanDuel Sportsbook right now, 3.5 wins. Where are you at with that, AJ? Is it possible for Bill to double his win total from last year and potentially get to a bowl this season?
I think there is. I would go the over on this one. I feel pretty confident with it because last year there were two big things, and I think Bill really kind of fixed it. They pushed players way too hard during practice last year and started the season with a lot of like soft tissue injuries and things like that just kind of lingered, and then you lost all of your depth. They have improved depth. Their off-season plan, it's night and day. When I walk by the weight room before practice last year, there was like 30 guys in there. Now it's like you can find 3 or 4. They're healthier. You also look at the games that BC lost last year. 4 of them, I think they lost on one play. Larnigan throwing an interception in the end zone against Cal. Like, they would have won that game. Turbo fumbled in 2 different games at the end zone that they would have won. Like, there's lots of that. And yes, Bill Parcells did say, you are what your record says you are. But I think there's more talent on this team. And I do feel they can pick off a few teams quick. Like, I think the first 3 games are crucial. Cincinnati, Rutgers, and Maine. If they can win 2 out of 3, or heck, if they're better than what I think they are going to be and win 3 out of the 4, they'll get their 4 wins easy.
Okay. BC potentially going over this season. He's AJ Black of Locked On Boston College. Also check him out over on Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Sports Network. Year one for Tavita Pritchard, back on the farm there at Stanford. We'll preview Stanford Cardinals here in just a moment on Locked On ACC. Last but certainly not least, let's head out to the West Coast, to Palo Alto, the breakdown, the Stanford Cardinal heading into year one under Tavita Pritchard. As you will know, had a famous upset back in 2007 over USC. What's your deal? No, what's your deal? Jim Harbaugh, Pete Carroll going at it back then. To break down the Stanford Cardinal is Alex Hou, who covers Stanford, the Stanford football updates, and the Cardinal Canopy podcast. Alex, do tell me, what are the vibes now that the native son, Tavita Pritchard, is back on the farm and heading into this year where there's a lot of unknown around the Cardinal?
I think the one word you can say is refreshing. First off, thanks for having me on. Stanford has gone from the highest of highs of a 2016 Rose Bowl to the lowest of lows, being the laughingstock of the Pac-12 and now the ACC for quite a bit. But we believe in Andrew Luck, and we believe that he's picked the right guy. Tavita Pritchard is a Stanford man through and through. He's 39 years old. He's a young, energetic head coach. And, I think that he is continuing what Frank Reich did last year and building a really strong culture out at Stanford. So I'm excited for the season, even if it's not necessarily, the most winning season.
So Stanford, even when y'all have been a laughing stock, quote unquote, a lot of people don't realize this. Y'all have pulled off some pretty big upsets. Tavita Pritchard was a part of an upset that was actually on a good team, or a good-ish team. When you look at this year's schedule, it's a little bit of a murder's row. You have plenty of opportunities to get you that upset. So, Alex, if you had to pick one team that you're like, oh, we going to catch them slipping. Micah Ford going to rush for about 180. Davis Warren going to look like a real quarterback. We going to get us one. Where would that be?
Oh, God, that's a great question. There are definitely three candidates for that. There's the Miami game on Friday night for week one. There's the Notre Dame game away, and then there's the Louisville game away. Those are the three that are most important. First, I'll say about the schedule. The schedule is difficult, no doubt, but this is a pretty typical Stanford schedule where we schedule ourselves some really hard opponents. It happens every year, even in the Pac-12, where we had to play USC every year. Now we're playing SMU every year. It's just a fact of life at this point, and we just accept it. I'm going to go maybe unconventional in terms of the upset. I think that Stanford pulls it off again against Louisville, which is, it's very bold for me to say, given how good Isaac Brown is, how good Jeff Brom is. But Stanford has history against Louisville, and Stanford had no business winning against Louisville in 2023, I believe it was, or 2024.
2024,
and they pulled it off. So put me down as the Louisville upset. Although I think the Notre Dame one would be much sweeter.
Oh, well, certainly. Knowing the rivalry that is there between Stanford and Notre Dame, there's been great games. I remember it was like the field goal back in like 2015, 16 at the end of that game that kept Notre Dame out of the kind of the playoff back then. So they've had some great ones. There was an upset in South Bend not too long ago, a Stanford team that would have been considered a laughing stock of the Pac-12 was not a laughing stock in South Bend that afternoon. But looking at the offense, Davis Warren, I'm not going to lie to you, Alex. I'm not super excited about this one. I don't know how you feel, but can you talk me into the offense being better than what it looks like on paper with Micah Ford toting the rock and then a receiver core where it feels like Nico Brown is going to have to be the top guy? Like sell me on this offense and it being passable after last year's issues with Elijah Brown and Ben Goldbranson.
I'll do my best. I can't guarantee that you'll be completely convinced by my answer, but I'll do my best. If you look at the quarterback play from Stanford the past 5 years, which is, again, it's crazy because Stanford has a long history of fantastic quarterbacks, from John Elway to Andrew Luck to even Kevin Hogan, to in the modern era, Davis Mills, who is now a backup quarterback for the Texans. He's no slouch. Tanner McKee. We've had our fair share of really good quarterbacks. But the last 5 years just haven't been it. We went from Ashton Daniels, who's now at Florida State, to a weird tandem of Ben Goldbranson and Elijah Brown. I'm going to sell you on this. The standards for quarterback play right now are so low at Stanford. Davis Warren has to be an upgrade. It's a look. I'll say this about Davis Warren. He's looked good this fall camp.
Okay.
People who have been watching the program for a while say that he's the best quarterback we've had since, maybe even better than Ashton Daniels. He is a true gamer. Look, no one can doubt that Michigan, with a piss poor O-line and a piss poor wide receiver core outside of Colston and Loveland, won 6 games and won the game against Ohio State. Davis Warren is a gamer. He's a survivor, a true survivor and a cancer survivor. And what he's done to the offensive side is he's really become the leader that we all thought a quarterback should be. I joke that he's bringing the Michigan man traits back to Stanford. It's true. And so he's not the flashiest quarterback. He certainly was not the top choice quarterback that Stanford fans had in mind going into the transfer portal. But he is definitely an upgrade over really bad quarterback performance over the past 5 years. But I don't think that Stanford's going to be the Stanford offense will not revolve around the quarterback. The Stanford offense will revolve around Michael Ford and this offensive line. The question is whether this offensive line can hold up. It's a question every year. I believe that we have much better coaching this year from the offensive line. It's a matter of staying healthy, and it's a matter of getting great wide receivers out of what we have right now, which is a question. But I think Caden High is going to take a step up. Nico Brown is come out of Yale, and he was PFF's best wide receiver out of Yale this year. Or last year, and so we'll see what happens. But this is going to be a run-first offense, definitely. It's going to feel very David Shaw-esque in that sense, but which may scare Stanford fans. But I believe that Tavita will bring some creativity to that offense.
Okay, all right. Now we talked about you didn't sell me, but here's what I do know. Okay. You talked about the rivalry with Notre Dame. We all know that's not your biggest rival. Your biggest rival, them guys right down the street, them Golden Bears. They got the algorithm. They got the shiny new head coach that everybody's so excited about and all that. They're treating you like a second-class citizen over there in Palo Alto. And yet, last year was the first time in 5 years that Stanford beat Cal. So you tell me, Alex, number one, what does it mean to Stanford to beat Cal? Number two, what has to happen for Stanford to continue that and go on the streak like what they went on when I want to say it was the mid-2000s, it was about 9 straight or 10 straight of just Stanford waxing them boys. So what has to happen?
First, I'll speak about the rivalry with Cal. Yeah, that is our biggest rival. I hate Cal. You'll never get me to like that team. You'll never get me to like anything about Berkeley or anything about that campus. It is a visceral hatred. And they don't get it twisted. They've always been little bros. They will continue to be little bros to the superior academics and superior athletics that is at Stanford.
We get nerdy on them. We get nerdy.
That's the first thing. Second thing is the algorithm is a fantastic movement. I believe that they can get a little delusional sometimes and caught up with it. And every year we hear this is the year from Cal, and it's never the year. And so we are we're excited. But look, okay, seriously, it means everything to have the axe. When I was a student at Stanford, I was part of a streak that held the axe for 9 years, to the point where we took it for granted. Definitely not having the axe for the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years is really has really brought special meaning to having the axe back. And how did we get the axe back? We got the axe back in a 31-10 victory where we had 2 defensive scores. It's going to have to revolve around the defense. it's going to be the same thing with Stanford this year. We're going to have to revolve around the defense, and we're going to have to out physical every other team that we play this year in order to have a chance to be bowl eligible.
Who defensively? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I know that I'm going a little out of turn here. I love the hatred and the rivalry. I love that. We got too many con rivalries in the ACC. Too much. Oh, they're a good team. I don't want to be too disrespectful. That's the type of stuff I love. We got to have you on more. We're going to have you on more, Alex. But proceed, Julian.
Yeah, well, the great thing about bringing both of those teams from the Bay Area is the fact that they have each other to hate and to look across the Bay and spew venom, as we just got there from Alex. But you mentioned it's going to have to come defensively. We'd spent time talking about Davis Warren, Micah and the offensive line, what they have to do to hold up the season, be able to allow them to have success. But defensively, like, who are the guys that really have to stand up and carry Stanford this season?
Oh, wow. I will say Stanford's defense has some dogs this year. They really do have some dogs this year. We retained Matt Rose, a star inside linebacker. Expect him to have the same, if not even better season under second year of Andy Thompson, who is his interior linebackers coach. Fundamentally believe we have a star at every single position, or a potential star at every single position on the defense.
Okay.
On the defensive line, it's either Braden Marcelienka, who is, he's been a longtime interior D lineman, or Zach Rowell, who made Bruce Feldman's freaks list. Top speed of 20 miles per hour from an interior D lineman is kind of crazy. And the 4-3 scheme that Legion of Boom scheme that Chris Richard has this year has our D linemen going vertical as opposed to stopping the run gaps, which means that you're going to see a lot more sacks and a lot more chasing from our interior linemen this year than we even when Clay Patterson was wreaking havoc in the back last year. In terms of the secondary, the boundary corners, Brandon Nicholson is going to have a really good season. He is a sleeper candidate for All ACC, in my opinion. He had a great season. He had a breakout season last year. I expect him to continue taking steps up. And then in terms of the safety role, we're playing the 4-3, and I would be remiss to say that our Cam Chancellor this year is Jay Green, who had a great season last year again, hits hard, maybe not necessarily the most athletic, but he'll hit really, really hard, and that's exactly what Richard wants in his Legion of Boom safety this year. So I believe that we have a potential star at every single position, and defense is going to definitely keep us in games this year.
Yeah, I mean, retaining Matt Rose is obviously a huge for Tavita Pritchard going into his first year. And obviously having Andrew Luck, program alum who is the general manager, that probably helps too with the roster continuity that they do have defensively. FanDuel Sportsbook, looking at the over-under, they're not high on Stanford, 3.5 wins. You look at it, obviously this Saturday night against Hawaii, like that's got to be one you got to take. My alma mater, Elon's coming over there. That should be an easy win for you, I would hope. And then look, yeah, you have the axe. You could go back over across the Bay and get it again. It's just about where's that fourth win? Where can it come? So where are you at? Over, under 3.5 wins? Do you think they can get to 4 and 8? You think maybe they can even get to a bowl this season?
I'm definitely over 3.5. I would actually have personally set the line at probably 4.5 is probably a better line than 3.5 in my opinion. Okay. But this happens every year. The national pundits underestimate what Stanford can do, and Stanford turns around and surprises people. We did it last year. Even when we were winning, having those 3-win seasons, we weren't expected to win more than 2 games. And so this is not surprising for us. I think that we have to have the Hawaii game. Absolutely. And unfortunately for the Hawaii game, we're injured. We're in our right guard and our left tackle will be out for that game, as well as our 2 top receivers. But even with that, we should own the line of scrimmage and win that game. Elon is an obvious, probably mini buy win for Stanford. Elon is no disrespect to you, Julian. It's a mid-level FCS team, and so that's 2 wins right there. I think that big game each year is always a toss-up, no matter how good or bad each of those teams are. So let's say Stanford wins the axe back. It's 3 wins there. I think between Duke, Georgia Tech, Wake Forest, and Wake Forest, probably Virginia Tech, maybe Virginia Tech. You can pull 2 wins out of that, 2 or 3 wins out of that. And then all of a sudden you're thinking about a bowl, you're smelling a bowl conversation right there. Personally, my prediction, I'm generally on the more optimistic side. I do think that Stanford could make a bowl game this year, and it would be it would be that win that big game that would seal a bowl game win. But again, understand that I am probably more on the optimistic side than most people on Stanford.
Hey, that's totally fair, man. You got to have hope. And if you're not going to hope here going into week 0, then I don't know when you're going to have hope. But yeah, that the Hawaii game is certainly one you got to have. And that is concerning. We'll have our breakdown of that game on Friday as we head into week 0. Finally, some real football to talk about. But he is Alex Hou of Stanford Football Updates. Also, check out his podcast, the Cardinal Canopy Podcast. And of course, you're going to probably hear him more often here on Locked On ACC as we continue to check in with all of our friends who've helped preview the ACC with us this season. But Alex, appreciate your time as always, man. We'll talk you down the road.
Thank you very much for having me, and go Stanford.
Thanks so much to Tyler Wojciak of Locked On Irish, AJ Black of Locked On Boston College, and Eagle Insider, a part of the 247 Sports Network, and to Alex Hou of Stanford Football Updates and the Cardinal Canopy Podcast. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On ACC Podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your hosts, as always, Julian Council and Kenton Gibbs. Again, y'all subscribe and follow the show for free over on YouTube and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And be sure to follow us over on Twitter at Julian Council and at TGIF_Kenton. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole, and we'll talk to y'all on Thursday as we're going to have our official ACC prediction show. We're going to tell you who's going to win the conference, who's going to get fired, who's going to make the college football playoff, and more here on Thursday on Locked On ACC.